that there's people coming to check this out. My name is Craig Campbell, and I'm the owner and lead designer at Nerd Burger Games. And I've made a few RPGs. Got some things that are kind of in the midst of happening. Some things just came out, some things that are coming up. And I've got something that I'm looking at getting going somewhere down the road. It's a little bit up in the air, but we'll figure that all out. And I thought I would try to make a little bit of an event out of this and say hello and welcome people to learn a little bit about this game that I'm just starting to tinker around with a little bit. The beautiful thing about it is that it is going to use the same mechanical system as Capers, as the playing card system from that game, so there won't need to be a lot of deep playtesting regarding the system. There'll be like all the subsystem kind of stuff that we'll kind of need to see some playtest work eventually. But the guts of the game won't need to be playtested, so that's handy. You see in front of you a little bit of the document that I'm working on, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm happy to welcome to the stream in the recording here Dan Morrison. Is it Morrison?
Yep, that's cool. Hello.
Hello, Dan Morrison.
Hello.
Has agreed to do artwork for the game. I approached him from seeing some of his artwork being shared around amongst RPG players and tabletop game players, and found some of his art really intriguing and really interesting, and liked some of the heavy line work and the bold color use. And I think that will all kind of work well for this game that I have planned. So I'm kind of running up to this a little bit slow. Hello, Kirby. Welcome aboard. Dan, what's your let's do this a little bit to kill some time and see if any other people show up. What's your background in illustration work, in artwork for games, or in general? In general.
So I got I'm trying to think back what my qualification is now. So I've got an illustration degree. After that, I fell into storyboarding for a couple of years, which I still do now. So that kind of took me away from my initial interest, which was science fiction, fantasy, and stuff like that. So I kind of fell into the more boring side of art, and then because there's a very boring side of art, and then I can't remember what year it was. It was quite a while ago now, but I worked for a card game called The Agents. Not sure, but some people might recognise that, or I don't know if you have any illustrations from that. But so I worked on a card game that had a pretty successful Kickstarter, and then from there I started to use that to work in other more fantasy and science fiction games. So I've worked for Reforged Studios on something which I can't talk about, and I've worked on
that's so much fun.
NDAs ruined my life. I've worked with they're making Animal Farm the book into a game, so I've worked as a concept artist on that. Mutant Year Zero, if you know it, that's a RPG series of games. So I worked on Mechatron, which is a robot-based expansion to that RPG.
Oh, robots! Robots.
That's
robots. Kind of where I found you, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. And I can't actually remember every job because
that's understandable. If you're working a lot, that's good. That means
it is good.
You don't remember everything because there's just so much of it.
Yeah, I'm terrible with names as well. So the focus the past couple of years has been on the thing that I like the most, which is science fiction and fantasy and doing stuff my way. And that's where I met you last week.
I reached out to Dan, gave him the basic rundown of what this game is. and he's intrigued. He's on board. We talked a little bit
Yeah.
about all the logistical side of things, all the boring stuff that nobody really cares about. But yeah, that's and like I said, I told you that this, Dan, and I've been telling people in general too, is that it kind of depends when this goes forward. Kind of depends on how things go with a Kickstarter that I have coming up to see if I can make a supplement for Capers. Hoping to do that. If the supplement thing starts happening, and it looks like I can make a couple more, then this game pushes a little bit. But I think that given a lot of the playtesting of the core of the game doesn't need to happen, I can probably start playtesting some of the, getting enough of this game together to playtest and start getting into that, even if I'm still kind of working on Caper stuff. Because putting together supplement work for Capers is actually, it sounds a little bit egotistical, but it's kind of easy for me because I've lived with Capers for 3 years, so I know the game inside and out. So I can write up a power in like no time, and then we just have to play test it and make sure it works. So that's the plan. Anyway, let's get to the meat of things here. I've been calling this Project Thunderhawk for a while because I just wanted to start to generate a little buzz and interest with my little fan base on the Discord server and all that. But I figured that with a Patreon going and the possibility of maybe Patreon people being able to see more of the inside scoop, maybe get a chance. This game I might throw some of the behind the scenes of earlier design, which is something I haven't usually done. Usually I wait till things are kind of underway for a bit before I start revealing too much. So I'm thinking maybe Patreon folks maybe get a little extra something. So keep that in mind. If you go to Patreon, Nerdburger Craig, it's floating around in there, a couple of bucks, and I'll send you inside scoop on some of the stuff that's going on, including this game, which has been called Project Thunderhawk, but the name of the game is not that. The name of the game is actually Code Warriors, and it is, at its simplest, Tron meets Mad Max. You are playing a program inside of a computer system that is crashing, and the end is coming. Everything is going to go dark. What do you do? So it becomes a question of how do you deal with the apocalypse? Is the apocalypse preventable? If it's not, how do you deal with that? So the idea, just kind of running through a little bit of what's going on with the game, is I think of it in 3 modes that you can play in. Listed here, this is kind of my document in progress. Easy mode is like, this is like, just let the apocalypse happen and everybody just plays action-adventure game a la Mad Max / Tron. So it's, it's a tale of survival and conflict in the ruins of this computer world civilization. Now, Kirby makes it sound, still sounds like the Matrix to me. It'll be Matrixy in that you are like inside of a computer system, but it's. I think when you see Dan's art, it'll make a little more sense. Is that it's going to look a little more Tron-ish. It's not going to be human people looking kind of stuff. In fact, this game, when the Kickstarter happens, will not have an artwork level for having your illustration in a book because nobody's going to look like a person. The characters are going to be humanoid, at least some of them, but you're not going to be looking at, facial similarities aren't going to be there, so I'm not going to have those types of levels. Easy mode, you can just play, beat 'em up, knock down, drag out, Mad Max, Road Warrior kind of stuff. Hard mode is intended to be where the apocalypse is preventable, but it's going to take some work, and so the characters can actually go on, the adventure, the story of the adventure story that is, that you build in a campaign is to actually prevent it from happening and try to at least arrest the apocalypse, and then that's the society you're in, or potentially even rebuild and kind of get the world back the way it was, the world of the system, that is. And then there's hopeless mode, which is where you, the apocalypse is coming, there's nothing you can do about it, you know that, and what do you do with the time you have remaining? So it becomes perhaps a more morose tale of people trying to find meaning in when I say people, I mean programs trying to find meaning in what's left of their lives. And so I think for Dan's purposes, that's, the apocalyptic thing. What I'm hoping to see for artwork is there's going to be, some of the art is going to show what the system and the programs and all the things within the system look like in their in their pristine state, like before the apocalypse hits, or very early in the apocalypse. And then by the time you get further on, there might be some artwork that shows where things are really degraded and buildings are kind of crumbling and pixelating and dissipating, de-resing, things like that. Characters will, like you might have this program character. He's bipedal, but he might be missing parts or have parts replaced. Part of it might be prone to de-resing and disappearing, so sometimes his arm isn't there. There might be things like that going on. So it should make for some interesting artwork. And my thought too, Dan, maybe you can speak to this, is there'd be a player section in the book and a GM section in the book. And I was actually thinking about the idea of, at the beginning of the player section is when all the artwork is of everything looking really good and pre-apocalypse. And as you go through the player section, each illustration gets progressively more apocalyptic to show that kind of process. And then do the same thing with the GM section. Let it start with everything looking nice, and by the time you get to the last illustrations in the GM section, it's the world that's kind of falling apart.
So is this virtual reality world that's suffering a apocalypse, or is it the real world that's suffering the apocalypse and that's having an effect?
Welcome to my world. There's a train, everybody.
I live next to it. Do you live in the 1920s when trains made that sound?
No, I just live near a train track. The hook for the apocalypse is, and what I hope will make the game replayable, is that my intention is to not... The player section will not tell you what the apocalypse is all about. In the GM section, there'll be 10, maybe 12, whatever I come up with, different reasons for the apocalypse happening. It could be simply that computer system is crashing. It could be that the larger world outside of the computer system is actually experiencing an apocalypse. It could be all sorts of things. So, like, what the apocalypse is and why it's happening might actually be the center of the story, and there'll be a bunch of different options for that.
Okay, cool.
That was my thought. Yeah, Kirby's like, the train makes an appearance. Kirby's heard me on stuff before. I have a train, yes. I use all my fat Kickstarter cash to buy a train, so it's pretty sweet. So that's the basics of kind of the modes of play, and that talks about like the artwork changing as you go across the book, which I think would be kind of a neat effect. As you're flipping the pages, you'd actually see the world degrade and fall apart.
So if I was a new player, how would a game start and progress and eventually finish?
Well, I think if you played like a one-shot kind of thing, you might have, make characters or have pre-generated characters ready for you. And more than likely, you're going to play kind of easy mode where, like, okay, you're in the Apocalypse Mad Max style and you're kind of doing interesting and fun and action-adventure-y stuff. And if it's a campaign, then, I think, like, the ideal way to play it, I think, would be literally play, like, right from the get-go. You create a character who kind of has a place in the world, and they're a particular program type. They have other program friends that they know. And if I say people or characters, I'm also, that's what I'm referring to as your program. And you, then everything starts to fall apart, and you'll see the collapse of society for whatever that reason is, which, the GM knows, maybe the players don't know anything about. And then where that goes, you could end up in the kind of mid-apocalypse range where you're struggling to, you could ultimately perhaps be, like what you see in apocalypse stories where people are trying to hold on to those last vestiges of what the world was like. They're trying to keep some sort of governmental institution in place or a familial structure that wants to hold up, or some sort of organization, and they may be able to maintain that, or it may fall to complete chaos. It's really kind of up to the players, and then you ultimately, does the apocalypse destroy everything completely, or do you manage to arrest it, and that's where the world ends up in this post-apocalyptic, or can you fix it, and can you restore it to what it was before? So it could be, my games tend to provide a lot of options to GMs to let them mold the game where they want it to be.
So what are these characters doing in the world in the first place?
They're programs in the computer. To answer Vince V. Harper do they know their programs? Yes, they do. They know their programs. They know they're in a computer. They know what their world is. They know that there are certain protocols and logics to how everything functions. They all have roles to play, and actually getting into the character types, you start with a program type, and all the different program types are related to different types of software that you might have on a computer. So your program is a part of that software, or is that software, however you want to define that. So you might have a character that is like a browser kind of character, where they are inherently inquisitive, and they're always searching for new information. They might actually be exploring the world even before the apocalypse falls apart. But when everything falls apart, then they are, they're the people that are seeking out the remnants of what's there. Being essentially genderless in the game. There's familial units to the extent that they do have a social system and they do bond to one another. But they basically they procreate by replicating themselves, and then free will takes the new program in a different direction. So they are doing what the computer is supposed to do until the computer is not really doing that anymore because it's falling apart. And then it's like, it becomes chaos of like, well, what do I do? Like, I don't have my role anymore. I was part of a word processing program and nobody's processing anything here because this system is crashing.
So what kind of programs can you play, do you think?
Real simply, what I've got laid out right now are... And they may not be these names. I've just got them listed right now. In a lot of cases, they're just shortened versions of what the program types are. There's browser types. They're just called browse right now. Pixes are parts of they're like analogous to drawing, drafting, and modeling programs. So they can actually create things. They can basically paint things into existence. Procs are procedural programs. They do the day-to-day work, like the stuff that you would see, like word processing, spreadsheets, emails, things that people use computers for all the time. Recs are video and audio recording, playback, and editing equipment. SAVs are your virus and malware protection and alert programs, things like that, things that keep the system safe, who have clearly failed. And SIMs are warriors and manipulators of the system who are basically they're avatars of video games that are on the system. I'm toying around with what that all means. Like, you might have a SIM who can change their form. They might switch from a warrior to a race car to a wizard based on like what game they most strongly identify themselves with as being a part of.
Okay.
Whatever games that are on the system or that have had information saved on the system. Yes, okay. The programs know the programs. I think I said that before.
So how do they react and interact with the world if they're not typically a human in a program? They're a program in a bigger program. How do they what do they do? Like, when they're kind of out the box and into this kind of destruction scenario, how do they kind of react with each other and interact with each other?
Well, I think, to keep it something that is relatable to people, it's like my intention is the game to be more or less like a typical cooperative RPG where you're playing characters that are working together. And then in this case, you might be playing programs of disparate types who are working together to survive or to solve the mystery of what's happening or what have you. So, and they interact with the world. To keep it from getting too out there, very much the same way a human being would react with their world. They actually do have to travel from place to place. There's a physicality to them and to their surroundings.
Okay.
So does that make sense? It's like it's not going to be real ephemeral. It's going to look like. Think about Tron. Like, in Tron, those characters are programs. They live in a program. They live in a world. There are buildings. There are elevators and doors and vehicles. Yeah. And there's landscapes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, what else happens? I just tried to scroll down your document, but it's not my screen. So.
That's okay. Just rolling down through a little bit more of it.
Is there?
This is all just the game stuff that people know from capers, advancements. and character building kind of stuff. Program types, I basically started to lay out kind of what each of the programs is like. They each have kind of a couple of features to them. Like Pixel,
So
for
is
example,
there?
they can fly, or actually this may end up just being kind of hover.
Yeah.
They can hover a certain height, and then they have this paintbrush ability that allows them to create impermanent things. So they can create basic tools. They can't create, for example, a specific key.
Yeah.
But they could create a tool that will do the function of that tool. So they
Yeah,
become very
so no-
valuable in the apocalypse.
So no meta breaking stuff.
Yeah.
Is there
If you
anything?
want a key into a place, you still got to get the key or lockpick or
Yeah.
whatever. But you can have like a Pix has like a bag of holding of like basic tools. They have a tool pack.
Is there anything about this game that will mark it out from others? Is there like its own unique? Maybe it's a thing that you can do, or it's a kind of a feature of the game, or maybe some kind of memorable bad guys or situations. Anything to kind of mark it out as Code Warriors. Something that really makes people think of Code Warriors when they see or they play or.
Well, and that's the thing I'm struggling with a little bit is actually like I like the name, because it's Road Warrior, like Mad Max and Road Warrior.
Yeah.
And it's code, like computer code, and so I think that like, the idea of what a Code Warrior means is I'm still kind of developing that. I'll find a way to work it into the game properly, because the right spot will find it. But like, what a Code Warrior may mean is like, particularly in the scenarios where you can actually fix the apocalypse and stop it from happening, that there may be like a prophecy or a partially deleted file, something that speaks of someday the end will come, all things are impermanent, and some but these things can be staved off by these Code Warriors, by these people, these programs that come in and manage to fix the problems that we have created. But there's ultimately the kind of this doom saying about it too, that there is the inevitable, because it's true when you think about computers. It's your computer's not going to last forever. It's not going to be able to run programs that come out 10 years from now. You just don't have the capacity to do that. So everything dies, everything ends, everything degrades at some point. Entropy is a part of the world, is part of what you have to deal with. But the Code Warriors can stave that off.
So could there be like a refugee situation where all these really old programs are trying to migrate to wherever's safest, maybe the newest part of this
Certainly, absolutely, it could be.
place,
Yeah,
but they can't get in for whatever reason.
Yeah, and even if you can't stop the apocalypse, the Code Warrior, quote unquote, could be what the characters come to be called by some of the populace in this end time. Like assuming that I'm actually making a heroic game. Everybody, I've made a lot of games where you're kind of the anti-hero or a villain, or at least like a gangster or something. This is a game where you could be playing that role at the end, where if the apocalypse can't happen or can't be stopped, you can be attempting to right the wrongs that you made to help those who are in need during those final days, to find meaning in that finality. And so they might become the Code Warriors and like helping a group of refugees who don't have a home yet, because the part of the world where their home was is now gone.
Okay, cool. So I see you've got a shooter, you've got duelist. Oh.
I'm sorry?
I'm looking at the wrong screen. So I was just looking at your kind of character archetypes, is that the word?
Right. The program types.
Yeah.
And that's not used.
But it's gone from the page.
Oh yeah, it's not to say that you can't play against. You can play against types certainly, but let's
Oh, yeah,
go back up real quick to you've got roles that kind of fit a number of things. You got browsers who are explorers and diplomats. Pixes are builders, creators. Procs are they're kind of the day-to-day workers, the workforce. Rex are spies and librarians, Savs are servant or protectors, and Sims are warriors.
Okay, cool. Is there like an overarching bad guy, a villain?
That would be kind of built into, I think, what the apocalypse is. I mean, there will be a great deal of setting information that describes all sorts of NPCs and so forth, and so you could easily say, okay, that NPC is really important, and what they're up to is contributing to the apocalypse or taking advantage of it and becoming the major villain of things. But I think like a single overarching villain might be built into a few of the apocalypse scenarios, where there's like one like master, like you're thinking about like Tron with the master control program, who is kind of in charge of all the bad things that were happening. There could be some of those.
Yeah, possibly. Or there could be that the situation itself creates these like a how do you say opposite force.
Yeah, a despot.
So if you're the good guys,
their hench people their hench programs come rolling in. Yeah.
Or even like a personification of, like you were saying, of the actual event itself. So maybe that happens by accident or by design.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm considering is like I'll do a few adventures that are just like here's a one snippet kind of adventure that you can play, but I'm not looking to write like a big full multi-adventure adventure path kind of thing, but I am thinking about like doing a couple of like here's an outline of an adventure path that kind of takes you from beginning to end of a particular storyline using one of the particular apocalypse types, and I could do exactly that, where like in this version of it there is this personification of entropy that gets generated by the computer as it's crashing. It's just one of the side effects of what's happening, and so there could be an actual individual force that could be dealt with. That could be really interesting. I like that idea.
Yeah. What's the deal with juice?
Juice.
I'm looking at the page.
In Capers, you have a resource called Moxie, which is it's a pool of points that each character has that you can spend and you regain. That allows you to do a number of things. In this, because it's using the same rule set for Code Warriors, the Moxie is going to be called Juice, and it is actually like excess power, excess electricity. It will serve that purpose of allowing you to gain additional cards to flip, or to prevent damage, or to do other little things that the Moxie allows you to do. But I'm looking at also making it excuse me, it's also going to function as currency in the game, and the idea being that early at the beginning of everything, you can spend juice that you have to buy stuff, but then once everything starts to fall apart, your individual character's juice reserve, the maximum that they can have, goes down because they're degrading as the system falls apart. They're part of the system, and so they have less juice to spend, which forces the world into a barter system. So by the time you get toward the end, you don't have the juice to spare because you need it to be able to save your butt occasionally. So now you need to actually kind of barter services or goods for things that you need. It's an attempt to turn mechanics into actually, transforming a monetary, currency, a capitalist currency, essentially, into a barter system, having that devolve and become a barter system.
Okay.
That's
nice.
The basics of that. And Mad Max wouldn't be good without cool vehicle rules and being able to do Mad Max style chases and everything. So these rules are actually in play I'm developing something that for a future Caper supplement too, because there's an idea I have for a supplement that requires we kind of got to get to the vehicle rules because we need to be able to do a good chase for that.
So do you envisage this game to be mainly the kind of Mad Max style kind of traveling and vehicle interactions, and then broken up by stuff that happens on foot, or or are they going to be like a special event that only happens occasionally?
I would expect that the vehicle chase combat kind of stuff would be something that happens like occasionally. You know, you'd have like a cool vehicle combat or a chase sequence now and then, but it'll still, you know, the characters may move around on vehicles, but to have like the actual chaser combat may only happen occasionally because there's a lot that you can do on foot and with other non-combat oriented kind of challenges and encounters too that the vehicle thing is supposed to be kind of a fun, cool thing that you can do, but it's not necessarily going to be something that defines the whole.
I was just
that's fine. That's a reasonable question, and it's ultimately up to the play group, right? If they want to have a vehicle chase every session, go for it. Go nuts. Have a play.
Cool. I was just wondering if I have to draw loads and loads of cars.
There'll be some.
No, that's cool. And so the vehicles, I presume, then can be not bound by. They don't have to look like the vehicles that I have today. They can be anything.
There'll be a lot
that you can imagine.
Yeah, and for the record, everybody too, that like since this is like a completely wholly imagined brand new world, like I don't know what any of these things look like. I have ideas. There's going to be a whole concepting process that happens up front. Like when I was having Beth do stuff on Capers, it's like, okay, well, it's all of us. It's people in the 1920s. We all know what the 1920s looks like, but give them superpowers. So, you know, she just gave me like a couple of style sketches of like, you know, what the people are going to look like, kind of get a sense of it. But there wasn't a lot that had to go into it because it was supposed to just look like the 20s. Whereas this is going to be an interesting process of like kind of inventing, well, what do vehicles look like in this world? What does the landscape look like? What do these different types of programs look like?
Yeah. Did you ever read a book called Fearsome Engine by Ian Banks or Ian N. Banks?
I have not.
Maybe you should, because it does. It kind of is quite old now, so obviously a lot of things have changed when it comes to technology.
Sure.
But it kind of deals with. Someone said yes.
What was the name?
It kind of deals with Fearsome Engine, but it's spelled phonetically. As in F-E-F-double-R. I'm going to type it. I'll just type it into the thing. Bear with me. Yeah, but part of the story is kind of detailing. Oh, how do I spell it? It might be like this.
I'll find it. Because if I put the name in there too, you know, like Google will probably shoot back.
Yeah.
Mean this?
Yeah. So part of the story.
Oh, there.
Say again, sorry.
What was
Ian M. Banks. Ian with two I's and Banks. I'm just typing it in.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so part of the story kind of details how this kind of digital world works in tandem with the reality and how it goes way faster than it does for us in real life, and how these kind of generations and centuries and evolutions go on, like in the lifetime of a normal person, and how their kind of consciousness gets kicked down. Yeah, gets kicked into it after they've lived for 7 lives.
Sure.
And then, you know, they kind of have this kind of immortal soul that just degrades and degrades and degrades, but faster in that reality as time gets slower in the other one. But it's good.
Interesting.
That's a very piss-poor explanation of the book.
That's okay.
But yeah, it's quite short, and there's a lot going on in it, but the stuff about living in the kind of virtual reality against your will is really, really good. I recommend.
Cool. As far as like characters in an RPG have cool abilities, your programs will have upgrades. I'm working on just like a whole bunch of ideas. This is really just a list of like things that it's all the powers from Capers, and not all of them are going to translate properly. It makes sense in this game, and then there's other ideas that I've started to put in there too. But I'm starting to tinker with what that might mean, how these might work. I'm thinking that there'll be a couple of different types. The minor ones that are just kind of abilities that you gain, major ones has, you know, like the ability is built in. It has an effect that always functions. But then once you get into the apocalypse and everything starts to kind of break down and be a little more chaotic, there's ways to overcharge your upgrade, and it works by flipping a card. And like in Capers, clubs is always the worst, and spades is always the best, so things go up. But then there will also be a chance of glitching when you try to overcharge, so you may end up with some bad things happening if you glitch. And the glitches are going to be bad. Like your upgrade is going to be non-functional until you manage to fix it. You could take a bunch of damage. Like there's going to be. I'm still tinkering with ideas. This is just like the beginning of all of that. But once I once I get the basic idea put together, then it's a matter of writing like 10 or so upgrades of major and 10 minor, and putting them out there to play test and see how it starts to work, and then refining from there.
So you said earlier that the world degrades the more you play it. Mm-hmm. So does that have effect on the rule system in the way that things get more and more random? If I'm not entirely sure how you kind of play the game, but if you're going to be rolling stuff, is that going to be less reliable kind of the longer you play as the system degrades?
I think I'm going to build the unreliability of things into a handful of things that are that are actually mechanical, game mechanics oriented, like your upgrades, the overcharge being potentially glitchy, the not having as much juice available is going to be kind of built into the system. I'm not sure. I want to be. I want to be careful about getting too mechanical in that, and just let it be very strongly not enforced, but like strongly suggested in the GM section, to make sure that the GM kind of plays it that way. Like get it to, like as they go along, they might be finding things that they can use, but they might be, things that need to be repaired before they're going to be useful, rather than finding an item that's ready to use. And so I do need to develop repair rules and things like that, because there's going to be some of that going on. I'm not sure. I want to be careful not to get too mechanical with it, because then it's like every few game sessions you have to learn a new set of rules.
Yeah.
So build it into a few really important things, and then let the rest of it kind of be GM focused.
Interesting. And so for the art stuff then. For the art stuff, what did you have in mind for? Did you want like full color images, like some of the examples that I saw that you had before, or did you want more kind of some kind of more concept-y stuff, like pen and ink, pencil?
I think we'll start with. The concepting will start with, it'll be probably a lot of just like line work to kind of just figure out what these things look like.
Yeah.
And then as far as the color side of things go, I think that your color, your bold. And let's actually show. Let's do this. Let's show some of what got me interested in your work. This is actually the first piece that made me think, ooh, hey, this guy might be what I'm looking for. Not that a character looks like this, but I really liked the decay.
Yeah.
I liked, that there was a strong use of black line and some shading, and then like very bold colors, and then there was this sense of decay about everything, where it was all rusting and the cloth is coming apart and the robot's kind of rusty, and so that just it's
I think
Code Warriors
what will be interesting would be
going to look like this, but it's going to have some of those features to it.
Yeah. I think what will be interesting if it is about these kind of virtual worlds decaying, then more kind of, I can't remember what you call it, but kind of the digital kind of artifacts of when things are kind of breaking down and, your video player starts screwing up. And maybe
that's exactly the types of things I want to see. Like, if a character, late in the game, late in the apocalypse, you might have this character, for example, and they're right in their, this arm right here might get like blocky pixelated.
Yeah.
To reflect that it's kind of coming apart and maybe it's not as useful as it once was. And maybe there's a mechanical effect to that. We'll see what happens. There might be things where
Yeah.
your
Well, you know, when you get your kind of the cursed Windows box, which keeps repeating itself as you kind of click it.
Right.
Maybe, and you can see the progress it's made across the screen, where it's kind of repeating itself.
Right.
As it's saying.
Yeah, like that kind
You
of
could have that as like how someone moves, or just how they appear. Just.
Yep. I think that it would be absolutely appropriate to steal from all of the stupid stuff that we see on the screen when computers don't work quite right, and then or just like the idea of what the computer is too. Like that this guy was like I almost imagine like if something gets killed in a version of the game where death is real death, like you can't reboot or something like that, that you would actually see like the person would explode into not necessarily literally ones and zeros, but it could be like two different types of particles that's supposed to represent this is a 1 and this is a 0. And they just, and they kind of blow up into, and then the computer winds blow them away, or maybe they just land in a pile, or something like that. I could see, rather than a body falling over, for example.
Yeah, sure. Something a bit more dramatic.
I was thinking about thinking of it as the character, the character or the object de-reses. They the solidity just falls apart. And then I had these are some of the other things, particularly a couple of pieces that are kind of robot-like of yours.
Let me have a look. Oh,
not that they will look. This is the characters will look like these, but this is, these were things that kind of inspired me to reach out to you.
So this is for this concept work for another a cyberpunk game called Black Code, which I think is being made as and when the guy has time to do it. So it's. Would you call your game cyberpunk? I wouldn't, I guess, but maybe it does kind of skirt on that genre.
It has some cyberpunk flavors, just because upgrades feel an awful lot like cyberware.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, hey, we're augmenting your normal body with these other things. It's just that it's not as invasive. Like you're a program and you're getting this other program upgrade to you, rather than being a flesh and blood human who's getting something cybernetic attached to you. So it's not foreign. How about there's a cult of programs that believe pixelation of a program means the program is about to transcend? Oh yeah, absolutely. So those were some of the pieces that got me looking at you.
Okay, cool. So neon, lots of neon glow.
I imagine neon, chrome. To some extent, and there'd be again one of those things where, as we get further in the apocalypse, the neon is duller. Or we might even if we really want to show the degradation of things as you go through. We could literally have iconic characters, who are in have an iconic character of each program type and have them appear more than just in the program type page. Have them show up in other illustrations later in the player section, so you can see, okay, well, this is what happens when this type of program degrades. Like, this is what they start to look like. This is them partway through degrading, and then later in the player section here, they're in another shot of some action happening, some scene happening, and they're even more degraded. Which might actually help kind of give everybody a sense of what it's supposed to look like. Like, here's one character in 3 stages of falling apart.
Yeah. Okay, nice.
And kind of do that for the player section, and then the GM section can have all sorts of illustrations of here's NPCs. These are all inspirations for NPCs. And just looking at weapons and things, kind of similar. People who play Cabers, you recognize this. Just different types of weapons, damage, based on color and suit. Because it is a playing card-based thing. I'm sorry?
Could you have a situation where you use another program as a weapon? I don't know how it would work if you're a programmer yourself. Maybe there's a kind of a moral quandary of doing that. But
yeah, I'm not sure.
Could you like enslave? Maybe maybe if a program's gone mad and it doesn't matter, then you could maybe use it as a weapon against something else.
Potentially, yeah. Interesting.
Because everything would be a program in the sense that there wouldn't be a gun.
Yeah, and
just
there would be
flying in the middle of the computer.
Right. There would be, everything inside the computer is just a physical representation of information.
Yeah.
And so it's just you wouldn't necessarily be mind controlling as much as you would be rewriting code. Somebody to make to program them to do something. That could be a capability that you would have, or that could be a downside to, like, there could be NPCs who when they get far enough along in their own personal degrading that becomes something that they become highly suggestive, simply because like you start talking to them and they start to translate that into directives. Even though you're not, they haven't got their free will, because they're just like they're overwriting code in order to try to keep themselves functioning, and they're just doing things. They're filling their brains with things to do based on what people are saying. So you come across this character and you say you say something about I really gotta fix the car, whatever the car is called. We don't know what cars are called yet. And then a short time later, you see this guy fixing the car for you.
So what about if everything's been destroyed? What about things like viruses and worms and kind of other invasive software? Do they get say in this, or do they kind of make an appearance?
That's in the works. I'm thinking about how that all fits in there. I'm thinking one of the ways of dealing damage that would be very difficult to heal or to remove would be actual virus damage. That it does more permanent damage to you. But I don't know for sure.
I was wondering if it would be nice to kind of join forces with them in a way, because you're both going to be suffering the end result of being deleted or whatever. So your allegiances are kind of aligned at this point.
Sure. Yeah, that could be interesting.
So you could have this very kind of alien...
Right up on worms and different types of malware and things that they don't want to return to oblivion.
Well, usually you would, if you're living in this kind of virtual world, they would be your kind of classical enemies. Right. But in this case, they're on the same side because they're trying to survive.
Right. So akin to well, it's not exactly that, but there's a RPG called Necessary Evil where you've got the superheroes and the supervillains, and they're always fighting with each other, and then this superior alien force shows up, and the superheroes get wiped out, and the supervillains join forces with the governments of the world and the remaining sidekicks in order to fight the aliens off. Because if we don't fight the aliens off, there's not going to be a world left for me to conquer.
Yeah.
Interesting. Beautiful stuff, blah, blah, blah. The collapse, that's, basic information about, that's the event of the apocalypse, we'll call it the collapse. From NPCs, because I did one playtest at one point of a little bit of vehicle rule stuff, and I had some NPCs, and then as everything breaks down, there are anomalies that show up, things that weren't part of the normal protocol and logic of the computer. And so these are, this game's version of a monster.
Yeah. Okay.
As well as this version of these are there's monsters that are actually physical things that are relatively small. They're the size of your characters, or maybe a little bigger or smaller. And then they're full-on system hazards, things that you can't. They're mindless. They don't have. You can't necessarily defeat them. You can only delay them or redirect them or try to survive them, like a data storm that comes in and just sweeps through an area. There's only so much you can do about that. It's just an environmental hazard, basically. I think that's most of the document, everybody. Any other questions in the chat there, folks? one of the things I tinkered around a little bit with, and this is just, you wouldn't have to use this map. I think, did I have the, yeah, here's the map. This is just something I kind of pulled together. Come on, open up. There we go. Let me close and get it over here. My thought for a map would be to include, to do a map of a system. Like this could be the system that you're playing in, and then and you can map your own if you want to. And I would even provide, like in the back of the book, there'd be a blank grid like this, and then also this will be a color map in the GM section, but also then it could be I could do a black and white version in the back of the book that you could, or that as a PDF that you could print out, so you can. The idea being that you've got in the game there's playing cards, and as the apocalypse goes, you can flip one card, and then flip another card, and the intersection of those cards, that area goes away.
Okay, cool.
So the world actually does fall apart. So here's another mechanical aspect, like you were talking about, Dan, of seeing mechanics that actually reflect the world in a way. And these are just ideas. I don't even know what all of these are. What's the spire? What's the random? I don't know what those are. I just kind of came up with interesting ideas. But like, as an example, there might be a font that's where power comes from. The data stream rolls through the hub, which is like your main city in the center of everything, and then it dumps into the chasm. But if one of those squares where the data stream goes disappears, then power never gets to the hub. And so the city falls to chaos faster because of that.
Yeah. I wonder if you could make the maps relate in some way to the kind of the way a circuit board looks. I can't remember the terminology for all the kind of lines and stuff, but you know how it kind of looks a bit like a city map.
Yeah,
from the future.
I've certainly thought about that. One of the things that I'm just being wary, and we'll see what happens. I think once I get a better idea of what I want to do with the map, I'll know. But I'm not sure if the map is something that you were looking at. I talked to somebody else about an idea for the map, and I have had people mention the circuit board kind of thing. I want to be a little careful to not, there's a fine line to walk between making it just like here's clear influence of like an actual computer system, how computers actually work, how they actually look, how they actually function. Yeah. And then because if the more you do that, the more, quite honestly, I'm going to have people saying, well, actually, this is how it works, and I don't want to deal with that because this is a game. So I could see this map, as it's at the very least, I could see shades of a computer circuit board being part of this. Like the map that's full color would very very well be green with metallic, line work and so forth, and so that it could feel. Aesthetically like a circuit board, even if it doesn't look like a proper circuit board. So absolutely. But I stole the city grid thing or the world grid thing a little bit from. He uses it a different way. There's a game called Part-Time Gods that you have a grid of the city that your characters live in, and it's this abstract thing. It's this grid, but it allows you to develop, to know where your followers are and where your influence is, and then you roll dice and you figure out that the intersection of the dice causes certain areas to be affected different ways, and that causes problems for you sometimes. So I thought it was interesting, an interesting way to like actually allow you to affect the world and have the world affect your character. And with a game like this, it's perfectly reasonable that you just do this abstract kind of perfectly gridded thing.
Yeah, sure. And what do you win? What's the winning thing? What do you get if you win this game when you play it? Are you allowed to say?
Well, it's an RPG. It's traditional in its nature. It's a win if everybody has a good time telling the story.
Yeah.
If you can have your characters survive the apocalypse, prevent the apocalypse, that's great. That's cool. But that's ultimately not the goal of what I'm looking to do with the game. This is,
Yeah. And do you have any kind of idea of kind of future, say if this is successful or whatever, where would you like to kind of take it next?
Oh God, I don't know. Capers did well with the Kickstarter. We did a deck of playing, themed deck of playing cards, and all sorts of, I'll have all this PDF support material anyway because we do, in like a nice form fillable character sheet and adventures and things to go with it. As far as whether there'd be supplements or more game content, that's I don't know. What happens with Capers Noir with this Kickstarter for the supplement I'm doing soon, that's going to determine a lot.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to see whether or not this is actually something that is reasonable to do for a little bitty game designer.
Yeah, no.
So.
No, I was just interested in where you would, if you had the opportunity, where you would push it or something like that. But you have to make the game first, don't you?
Yep, got to see what happens. It's all crapshoot until you get. It's all wishes and dreams while you're making it, and then you run a Kickstarter, and you basically at that point ask permission. Can I publish this game? Everybody, is this cool enough for you? And then based on how that goes, then you've got a lot more data to work from as far as whether you want to.
So, someone's asked if you wanted it to go for that retro Tron look right off the get go.
I don't want it to look. I want people to look at it and say, "Wow, that's really cool." Kind of Tronish, but not to look at it.
You don't want it to
that's
be
Tron.
the game.
No.
Yeah.
So
it'll be dangerous.
Retro, I have no particular interest in retro. Wasn't.
You don't know? Sorry, or you do?
I don't. I wasn't thinking of it in those terms at all. I'd like it to be its own. Visually, I'd like it to be its own thing. And that's one thing that hopefully you will see as we work together. I think, ask Beth, I guess, who's done a lot of work for me. I'm pretty open on letting the artist interpret the world. Like, I'll give you what I'm looking at, and we'll have the concepting, and so that'll get a lot hammered out beforehand. But like the front cover, I get picky on the front cover. Because it's the face of the game. But then, unless there's a really, really good reason to start messing around with the interior work, it's like if there's something that really just doesn't work for me, I do very much like to let the artist express themselves and let them own it. Let it really be, feel like it's theirs. Like they're not just drawing what I want them to draw. I'm giving you, here's an outline, make it cool, make it look great.
Cool. It's 8:00 where I am, and I need to eat and drink beer.
Understood. So, this has been an hour. We got through a lot. So I think that probably about does it. If you want to cut out, I'm going to just put out one more call to the folks on the Twitch. If you have any more questions, now's the time, because I'm going to go. I don't know. It is 3 o'clock. It's not dinner time quite yet, but I'm going to go take care of some other stuff and then have some dinner. So
okay. Well, I'll hop off then.
In the Twitch, you want to talk? Now's the time.
I'll hop off. Nice to speak to you.
Yes.
And we'll speak to you soon.
Yep. Have a good night. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. And that was the artist, everybody. Can you destroy the USB port before other programs get out? Oh, Kirby. You're way ahead of me on that. Kinda, not really, sorta, a little bit. I'm thinking that, for one or more of those apocalypse scenarios, the power, the threat might be coming from outside the system. So yeah, like cutting off the system from the internet might be the way to fix things. When will you be able to start playing? It's going to be a little bit. The whole process is, like I said, it's going to depend on how Capers Noir does. If that just fails or just squeaks by, this will start happening a lot faster. If Capers Noir happens, I intend to get this up to playtestable speeds. At some time, there'll be playtesting of Code Warriors at some point this year. That's my full expectation. When that will happen, it will be earlier if Capers Noir and the supplements don't really seem like they're going to be viable. It'll happen a little later, probably, once I kind of get Noir out the door and get the next one. I want to get that kind of into place and into some playtesters' hands, and then while they're playtesting, I can crunch through a whole bunch of this stuff. That's the thought. But I expect that there will probably be playtesting sometime this year. And I'm thinking that the inside scoop stuff on this, the more in-depth inside scoop kind of stuff, will probably come, as I said at the beginning of the show, into the Patreon, if I can hopefully attract some people into the Patreon. We'll see how that goes. Right now, it's just the first couple of days of it. See if anybody plans to get on board with that. Are you looking to use other writers? Almost. Yeah. There's a part of me that's like, no, this one's going to be my baby. But probably, there'll probably be some other writers involved. One of the things I like to do, like the game system, I'll probably do myself, all that stuff, and all the player stuff, basically. I do like to use writers for setting stuff because I always get worried that if I do too much of the setting stuff myself, I feel like I'm going to start to repeat myself, and there's going to be ideas that I'm just not thinking of. So I need to, I like giving out some amount of the backdrop, the setting of the world to other people because they're going to think of things that I would never think of. So I expect there probably will be at some point. But it'll be one of those things that'll be kind of in the second half of development when I'm fleshing out the world more. I'll get enough of it fleshed out to run some playtests, and then we'll add to it later. No, Kirby, there's two people. He just doesn't get access to the Discord yet. One more try. Got anybody else got a question, or can I go? Hope everybody is interested in digging on the idea. I've been kind of sitting on this for, I don't know, maybe a year. Just tinkering with stuff here and there. The upgrades are actually like version 2 of what I was planning to do with the upgrades because I decided I needed to get the playing cards more involved. So the idea of overcharging and having the card flip mean something was something that I started to explore just recently. So there you go. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me on my little Twitch stream here. I'm going to let this, we're going to wrap this up, let it go up. It'll be up there for a couple of weeks for people to watch on Twitch. I'll also get a download of it at some point, and it'll go up on a YouTube channel in time. I just need to get, like an intro video and some other stuff kind of squared away on the YouTube channel, and then everybody will be able to start seeing some of this stuff. I got to get it together before I run that Capers campaign because I need a place to put the games. So, everybody, thank you. Thank you for tuning in as I reveal Code Warriors to people. Lots of fun. Take it easy. Bye.